Hello, welcome to Swim University. Our topic today is swim safety. Safety is always first. First 5 safety rules of swimming. These are the rules that you want to go over with your students as often as possible and at least once every class so that your students have a good and clear understanding of the safety rules that are expected of them during class. These first 5 safety rules are also posted in the swim room in large letters on a poster on the back wall. Rule number 1, you can only be in the pool if a coach is in the pool with you. That is a very important rule, and it extends into the number 1 swim safety rule, which is never swim alone. Rule number 2, listen to the coach and follow directions. That is essential for swim safety during class, that you have students that are following directions and listening to the teacher. After all, you are responsible for the student's safety, and you cannot be responsible for a student who absolutely is not listening to you or is being defiant. And so that's an unsafe situation which needs to be remedied. So that is a rule for participation, to listen to the coach and follow directions. Rule number 3, stay on step 1 while you are waiting for your turn. This is an important safety rule for all levels. All levels should be on step 1 or taking a turn. Now, there are levels where you could have multiple students taking turns at a time, and in those instances, if you have 2 students out in the pool, that would indicate that both of those students are taking a turn. The other remaining students should be sitting on step 1. Or in some circumstances for the advanced level classes, they should be sitting on the deck. There shouldn't be any time where you have students that are not engaged with the teacher that are in the pool. So it's important to remember they should be taking their turn or in the safe zone, which is step 1, or on the deck. Rule number 4, walk while you are on the deck. No running, skipping, hopping, jumping, chassing, or galloping. So it's important to remember that walking is the only way to go when you're near a pool. You could slip, fall, and hurt yourself, and that is certainly something we want to avoid. So it's important for you to also abide by these rules and make sure that you yourself as an instructor are setting the right example and being safe for yourself and making sure you walk while you're on the deck. Rule number 5, be nice to each other during swim lessons. This is a rule that helps cover the importance of good manners during class. It covers all the no's, like no splashing, no hitting, etc., and states that in a positive way. It also is a way that encourages kids to be friendly with each other and enhance their the amount of fun that they're having in class. These are the first 5 safety rules. It's important that you reinforce those every class. It's important that you memorize and internalize these rules, even though they are posted in the swim room. It's important for you to know them so that you will be able to enforce them throughout the class time. If you have any questions about the first 5 safety rules, please direct your questions to a senior coach or a trainer or your manager. Okay. Thank you very much. Swim safety. Safety is always first. Topic B, safety rules for coaching. Safety rules for coaching. These are the 3 most important guidelines for a teacher to keep in mind while they're instructing their swim classes. These are guidelines for you to be a safe teacher. The number one rule for safety as a teacher is always face your class. You always face your class. Now, there may be moments when your eyes are averted, you're paying attention to a student, you have to turn around for practical circumstances to grab a piece of equipment. Those moments when your eyes or the direction of your body isn't facing your class shouldn't be any longer than 1 to 3 seconds. And I mean literally 1 to 3 seconds. If it goes longer than 1 to 3 seconds, you're starting to get into a habit of not facing and watching your students. And your supervision is the main key to your students' safety. So once you get into between 3 and 5 seconds that your attention is averted or you're not facing the direction of your entire class, and then you're getting into a higher risk category of a student being able to slip under the water without being noticed, okay, or to fall into the water or even intentionally submerged without being noticed, and that can increase the hazard. The idea of always facing your class is to reduce the amount of uncalculatable risk, okay? So you can't, it's an unknown risk when you're not looking at your students as to whether they're safe or not safe. When you're looking at your students, you can calculate the risk. For instance, you know how far a student might be able to swim to you. So you're allowing them to take a risk to attempt that swim because you're right there with them to help them. If you're not looking at your student, then that risk is unknown as to how long they might be in the water, etc. If I'm observing classes and or we have a trainer or mentor observing your classes, and they're counting the number of seconds that your eyes are averted from scanning your class. Now I think of this not as you're always staring at your class, but that your eyes are scanning, that you're not only paying attention to the student that you have, that's the safest student you have, is the one in your hands. The ones on the deck are a little less safe because you're not actually holding on to them. So it's important that you're scanning all of your class continually. And the amount of time between scans, maximum, should be about 3 seconds. Now, if it goes beyond that, it would be, you would most likely get a verbal warning that I would talk to you and let you know that 5 seconds is a bit too long for safety and for our parents and a comfort level. You know, they want their children to be safe too, and if it doesn't appear that the teacher is paying attention to all the students, that leads to a doubt in their minds of the safety of their child. And rightfully so, because if the amount of time between scans reaches 10 seconds, then that would be not only a safety warning, but that's a risk of losing employment with tricks. Our swim program is set up that you are the lifeguard services for your class. And if more than 10 seconds goes by without you scanning your class, you're not providing adequate lifeguard services for your students. And that can lead to an extremely high level of risk for them to be in danger. So you can't go up to that 10-second and absolutely not past that. It's not a judgment on anybody's ability or inability. It's just important to remember that that's the safety factor. And there are other swim schools that have they have lifeguard on deck because they have other swim activities going on that are not directly engaged with the teacher. However, all of our activities are directly engaged with the teacher. So we lifeguard train our teachers, and the teacher is the lifeguard for the class. That's why it's important that as the lifeguard of the class, you never let the time between scanning exceed that 5-second threshold, and absolutely never go beyond the 10-second threshold. So that's all encompassed in always face your class. Number 2 rule, safety rule for coaching, is to stay within the skill level of your class. This encompasses also a number of things. You want to be sure that you're teaching the skills that are appropriate for the level of your class. You also want to be sure that the distances your students are swimming are appropriate for the level of your class. A great guide for what is appropriate is the skill chart. The skill chart is the standard for each level and each level's skill ability. So if the skill chart is saying the student needs to swim up to 5 feet, that's the maximum distance that you should be swimming those students. Regardless of whether or not they're going to be capable of swimming further, for that, as long as they're enrolled in that level, that's the maximum distance they go. And that's for the safety of all the students in the class. Remember, the safest student is the one in your hands. So when the skill chart says 5 feet, you're not only limiting that 5 feet for the safety of the student that's swimming the 5 feet, but also for the safety of the students that are on the step still. Because if you go past that, then you yourself are further than 5 feet away from the rest of your class, which may all be non-swimmers. So it's very important to stay within the skill level of your class, both with the skills and the skilled distances or duration, such as floating, etc. These are all encompassed in keeping your class safe. They also will influence the effectiveness that you have as a teacher in teaching those kids. Now, if you have a student who you think is clearly able to go beyond the skill level for a certain set of skills, it's important for you as a teacher to teach them the skills they're lacking in order to graduate the level. So if they're missing a few skills to graduate the level, but they may be able to go beyond in the other skills, you need to get them graduated so they can move up and practice the skills and the greater distances in the next level up. Okay, rule number 3, safety rules for coaching. Always take responsibility for safety. Now, this isn't about accepting blame, because believe me, if a child gets injured in your class, there's going to be plenty of blame going around. This is about preventing injuries and preventing accidents and limiting liability by remembering that you are responsible for the safety of the students in your class and also for other patrons that come into tricks, like for instance the parents. So you need to take responsibility for safety by taking action when it's required. The obvious action that we all take is rescuing students when they become distressed swimmers. So if they're swimming and they hit their maximum distance, and you pick them up before they take in water unintentionally. So another instance might be that if you see a piece of equipment out in the walkway, that you move that equipment to its appropriate place. Another instance might be that if we have a very elderly person sitting in the room and they seem to look like they're getting warmed up, it's appropriate to warn them that the heat in the room can cause heat exhaustion even if they're not doing anything, for people that are not in the pool. So it's important that they remember that you remember that you're responsible for safety. So it's your responsibility to take action to make sure that the environment that your students, your fellow teachers, other patrons, parents are all in a safe environment, that environment is safe for them, and you take those actions and ensure that. Swim safety, okay? Swim safety. Safety is always first. Letter C, topic C, facility safety. These are rules that are in general about our facility and policy. No children spectators under 12 allowed in the pool room. Now, this is not a firm rule where we keep them outside at all times. This rule is about not allowing any children under 12 to be spectators for the duration of class. So in other words, if there's a 4-year-old in class and their 6-year-old sister wants to watch the class, she needs to watch from one of the other designated areas, such as the playroom where she can watch on video, or the patio where she can watch through the window. She can come in at the start of class with mom to help her brother or sister get ready for class. She can come in at the end of class to help them leave at the end of class. It's okay if they come in intermittently with the parent, if the parent desires to take some pictures or some video. We just don't want, as a general rule, to have a lot of children in the pool room on the deck, because once again, our teachers are the lifeguards for the pool room, and so it increases the risk to those children if they're in the pool room on the deck. And we absolutely never allow any children to be spectators without a parent at any time. So if there's a child who wants to spectate in the pool room, even if they're 13 or 14, they should have a parent with them, okay, unless they're the babysitter, so they're going to be 16, 17, 18 or older. So younger children should always be accompanied by a parent in a pool room, and we should discourage them from being spectators for the entire duration of class. I hope that's clear. If you have any questions about that, please direct those questions to your manager. Rule number 2, keep program safety facility. Rule number 2, keep program equipment such as kickboards, diving frames, noodles, etc. grouped together in the smallest area possible. So you want to stack up the kickboard, stack up the equipment on top of that, so that you're using up the least amount of deck space. So the smallest area possible on the coping stone of the pool side. The coping stone is that rounded lip that goes around the pool. If we can keep all the equipment in that area, that makes our deck available for walking. And there's limited deck space as it is, and so it's very important that we preserve that deck space as well as possible for the foot traffic that we need to get in and out of the pool so nobody gets hurt, stepped on, tripped, or bumped into the pool on accident. Rule number 3, put away equipment that is not in use. It's important that to remember that the lesson plans will tell you what equipment you need for the week, and that any other equipment shouldn't be out. That should be put away because we don't need it for the lesson, and it could pose a hazard to our patrons because it once again takes up deck space that's already limited. Facility safety rule number 4, complete all opening and closing checklists. This is important because the opening and closing checklists are designed for providing safe equipment and pool room and facility and water balance for our patrons and our staff. So it's important that you remember that you need to complete all the opening checklists, so complete every spot, do all of the checks and checklists, inventories, etc., to make sure that we're providing the safest environment. Also, it's important to provide accurate information. I know that a lot of the entries on those opening and closing checklists are the same every time. They're the same every time. And that's because that's the settings that we have for them. It's important to always check because the one day that they could be different, we want to have advance notice of that, and that could pose a safety risk for our customers. So it's important that you always check and always provide accurate information. Never, ever, ever, never duplicate, just never copy the information from one column into the next column. That's absolutely not allowed and completely unsafe. So you always go and check the equipment. If you're not sure how to get a reading, say on a particular gauge or piece of equipment like the thermostat, then it's important to check with your trainer or your manager so that you get that information. But never guess and never just fill in a blank that you haven't actually checked the number for. Rule number 5, be responsible for the safety of our parent patrons. This is, like I said, about the grandparent that's come in that might get overwhelmed by the heat. If you notice anybody nodding off on the bench, it's important to check on them to make sure that they're not nodding off from heat exhaustion, but that maybe they're just tired and they need to go get some cooler air and take a walk around and come back. It's important to provide them warnings about any equipment that they might trip over. For instance, if we're allowing parents to take pictures during class, to tell them to watch their step, warn them about any hazards in the pool room. Facility safety number 6. Abide by all safety procedures and precautions when adding chemicals. Always wear shoes, safety goggles, and gloves when handling chemicals. Okay? It's important that you familiarize yourself with the safety data sheets of every chemical that you're going to use. It's important that you wear shoes, you wear safety goggles, and you wear gloves regardless of the chemical for every chemical. Anytime you're going to handle chemicals, gloves, goggles, make sure you have shoes on. Okay? That's the best way to prevent overexposure to chemicals, because maybe they're chemicals that don't seem that hazardous, but you might be using them more often than just somebody might in a regular day. So it's important to prevent overexposure. It's important to prevent accidental spilling on yourself or getting into your eyes. And this is the thing that I remind everybody. A lot of our employees, this is a job between high school and college. It's a job between junior college and a university. There are some employees that do work here a long term, and that's wonderful. But I always ask them, how long do you intend on working at Trix? For most of you, the answer isn't for the rest of your life. And granted, that's fine. For the ones that want to work here till you retire, such as myself, that's fantastic. But how long do you want to have eyes And the answer to that hopefully is the rest of your life. So that's why it's important to wear goggles. It's the same, with your hands. If you might not work at tricks forever, but you certainly want to keep your hands the rest of your life. So please remember to wear shoes, safety goggles, and gloves when handling chemicals. Any questions regarding facility safety, please direct to your swim safety. Excuse me. Topic number 2, be prepared. Preparation is the best way to prevent accidents and emergencies from happening, and that's the best way to stay safe. So number one thing about being prepared is to get training. You can get training by attending all required tricks trainings, get all required certification, do all required in-service. In-service is a monthly, actually you're going to be doing it weekly, but the monthly requirement is to read 4 chapters in the lifeguard book or the swimming and water safety book, one or the other, and most likely you'll finish the lifeguard book and then move on to the swimming and water safety book. And also you can be prepared by attending extra tricks trainings. This counts as a training for video, and we do have what we typically call our Friday trainings, which you get in-person one-on-one training where you get to ask questions of the trainer. Please do that, and you will not only get extra credit for the training, but be extra safe, and that's our goal. Under prepare yourself, we have number B, have a plan. We do have a plan. We call it the lesson plan, and we provide that for all of our instructors. We have what are called scripted lesson plans. Scripted lesson plans are where we tell you for the first 5 minutes do these skills and activities. For the next 9 minutes you do the next skills and activities. For the following 10 minutes you do the next skills and activities. So the lesson plans are scripted like that. We also give you suggestions on what to say, as well as highlight the skills or underline the skills that are on the child's skill chart that are being emphasized for that lesson. Along with having a plan is verify your role before class and review skill sheets. This is important for safety because number one, you got to know who you're expecting. That helps everybody get on the right track. It helps you keep a focused frame of mind. If you know which students are yours and you're not answering confused parents' questions about where their child belongs, so whose class or what. You also know what you're expecting as far as reviewing the skill sheets, whether or not this is a student who's been in your class and needs 1 or 2 skills to graduate, or whether it's a brand new tryout student that you're not sure what to expect, or even a makeup that you've never had before. You have to kind of in your mind treat a makeup that you haven't seen before like a tryout. You have to discover their swim ability and make sure that you're appropriately challenging them. You don't want to go beyond that, beyond their skill level, but you also want to be able to challenge them so the makeup is facilitating their swim progress. Have a plan. Be vigilant. That means to be watchful for emergencies and other action incentives. Emergencies, we all know what that is. That's something if you don't take action, somebody's going to get hurt for sure. That's an emergency. Other action incentives are things where it's maybe a hazard. Somebody's not destined to be hurt, but it certainly is a big possibility, such as equipment in the walkway, a student who looks like they're about to jump in the pool when they're on the side, a child who's in the pool room without a parent. Those are other action incentives that may not be emergencies, but they are important things to take care of for the safety of our students and patrons. Any questions about being prepared? Be sure you ask your trainer. Or swim safety. We're talking about being prepared as a teacher. So being prepared is about having a plan, being trained, and now we want to follow the plan, okay? Follow the lesson plan. That's the number one way to be sure you're following your plan, is to make sure that you understand and are incorporating the lesson plan in your classes. The lesson plans are what make the students' experience have continuity, so that a child who comes to a Monday 10 a.m. class is going to have a similar, if not same experience as a child who's going to come to a Wednesday 5:15 class. The experience of the child needs to be consistent in order for us to call this a swim program, okay? And that's what we have here is a swim program at Tricks, so we want all of our instructors to follow the lesson plan. Not just for the continuity of instruction, but for the continuity of safety. The lesson plans, following the lesson plans ensures one very important safety factor, and that is that you stay within the skill level of your class and individual students. Following the plan, take action immediately, okay? It's important that with first aid, CPR training, that you don't let delays go by in taking action. It's important to respond when you think there's an emergency, because sometimes there's only just something unusual happening at first. That's the time to investigate. Is this an emergency? That's the time to take action immediately. The moment you see that's unusual, that's when you take action. It's pretty obvious when there's a student who's a distressed swimmer. Take action. You're going to need to assist them. It's pretty obvious if a child accidentally falls over in the water and you see them. Take action. It's not so obvious when people are acting disoriented or there's signs of other possible emergencies. But if there's unusual behavior, that's when you need to start investigating, is this an emergency, and take action. C, take actions based on your training, okay? You need to take actions based upon the training that you receive either through Tricks or through your certifications as a lifeguard or professional rescuer through CPR and first aid. That training is specific, and so you can't do medical procedures that you might have seen on some extreme survival medical show. You can't be performing emergency tracheotomies on people. You take the actions according to your training or according to what is specifically directed of you to do by the 911 or another emergency person authorized with the authority to give you instruction on any emergency actions. So be sure that you're taking actions based on your training. That way you're going to be doing the right thing at the right time for the right person. Number 4, prepare the students. 4A, condition the students for listening. So we want to prepare the students for safety, and one of the best ways to do that is to condition the students for listening. That means get them ready, have them accustomed to listening, and some of the ways we can do that are just your standard reminders. Remind the students that you're expecting them to listen. It says listen to the warm-up coach. That's you, but what the emphasis here is to have them listen from the very start of class, that you're reminding them that listening to the teacher, listening to the coach is an expectation that you have for them. Preparing the students by conditioning them for listening. Another way you can do that is by setting examples of good listening. Sometimes we have the students help us out with skills like we say, okay, tell me when to go, tell us when to stop. It's important for you to be going when they say go and stop when they say stop, and show how you can be a good listener when it's your turn to be a listener. And those are 2 ways that you can help condition the students for listening. The next way to prepare the students for safety is to catch the students when they are listening. That's how you can help them to be prepared for safety, and you can condition them to listen. So when you catch them when they are doing the thing you ask them, you say, everybody sit down on step number 1. And you look at who's sitting on step 1 and say, wow, look, Billy's sitting on step 1, and Susie's sitting on step 1, and Delilah's sitting on step 1. And you go ahead and name off the students that are doing what you just asked them to do. Those students will repeat those behaviors, especially the behavior of listening to the teacher, in order to get that recognition. And So that in that way you're conditioning the students to be eager to do what you ask them to do. After all, what better students could a teacher hope for than students that are eager to listen to what the teacher tells them to do. Another way to prepare the students is to inform them of the safety rules. You need to inform them of the safety rules. Take a moment now and see if you can remember any of our first 5 safety rules that we teach our classes. So that would be the safety rules that are posted in the swim room. Take a moment and see if you can remember any of those 5 safety rules. Okay, next is to discipline yourself. We're talking about being prepared for safety, so you want to prepare yourself by doing the trainings, etc., and now you want to discipline yourself by paying attention to your behavior during class. Okay, you need to keep your focus on the lesson. There are themes, there are other teachers in the pool, there's fun stuff going on, there's holidays coming up, there's other parents that we may or may not be friends with. We want our focus to be on the lesson, okay, regardless of whether it might be distracted by positive or negative influences. It's important to remember that swim lessons are what we offer. And so there is an expectation from everyone, the parents, the students, your management, that the students are going to learn how to swim, and that's the main goal. The main way to do that is keep your focus on the lesson. That also will help keep the students focused on the lesson. It's going to enhance the safety of your class. Also, discipline yourself by always enforcing all safety rules. Always enforce all safety rules. Always enforce all safety rules is about being consistent. It's about making sure that you're enforcing the safety rules for safety, not because you've run out of patience, not because you like one student or don't like another student. You want to, not because your manager is watching or not watching, not because there's a parent who wants you to be strict or more relaxed with the students. Safety rules are indifferent to all of those factors, okay? They're above all of those things. Safety rules are important for safety's sake. So you want to always enforce all safety rules. 5C, discipline yourself by conducting all student evaluations to the standards set by your swim director. This is one of the biggest temptations an instructor will face, and that is to attempt to please a parent by placing a student in the level you think the parent wants them to be in, rather than the level that they should be properly evaluated for, according to the standards set by our program. Regardless of any experience you have or lack of experience evaluating students, we have specific guidelines that tell you exactly what skills are expected of students for graduating the level they're enrolled in, exactly what's expected of brand new students in order to evaluate what level they should enroll in. And those guidelines should be followed every time specifically. You will receive training on how to conduct those evaluations and what specific skills you are going to be evaluating for, and how to make that assessment and decision. And so it's very important to follow those guidelines and conduct those evaluations so that a teacher with a student in an advanced level class can expect that that student has completed all the prerequisites from the intermediate level class, and that they are in fact at the aptitude level for an advanced level student. And that is extremely important for safety, because as each level gets higher, the skills get more complicated, and there's an assumption, rightfully so, on the part of the instructor that the student should be able to do certain basic skills on their own. If you're expecting a student can swim across the pool and you're all the way on the other side of the pool and they cannot achieve that, you're increasing the risk to that student. So it's very important to conduct all evaluations to the standards set by the program, by your swim director. Discipline yourself by asking for help from your director when you think you need it, and sometimes when you don't think you need it. If there is at any time a situation, a puzzle, a question, a student's behavior, a parent's question, your own questions, that you don't feel you can answer for yourself or for those other people satisfactorily, then ask your director. Okay? The director's responsibility is making sure the entire program continues to be focused and administered in the way that will give every customer the Tricks swim experience. So if you are referring your questions to the director, you're going to be referring them to the source of the guide for the entire program. Okay, discipline yourself by never being in such a hurry that you neglect safety. You're never in too big of a hurry to abide by safety rules. Don't run on the deck. Make sure that you put your shoes on before you go handle chemicals. Put the gloves and goggles on. Even if you're just putting baking soda in the pool. Turn the fans off, the circulation fans when you add powdered chemicals so it's not blowing around a cloud in the pool room. Make sure you're abiding by all safety rules, okay, for yourself, and never be in too big of a hurry. You abide by the prescribed amount of time that people have to wait before they get into a pool after there's been chemicals added to the pool. So it's really important to make sure that you're abiding by all those guidelines in order to have the highest level of safety for our customers, our students, and our instructors. Okay. Swim safety topic number 6. Discipline your students. Discipline is a word that has its root in to follow. Okay. And so you're going to teach your students to follow. They're going to be following your leadership as an instructor. One of the most important things for disciplining your students is to teach them to be responsible for their own safety. Okay? If we were to ask the student, who's responsible to make sure that they're doing the things in the swim room to keep them safe? Okay? They may answer that the coach is. Okay? But what you want them to understand is that they are responsible. If they want to be in swim class, they need to be listening to the coach so that they will know to be safe. They know to wait for their turn. They know not to splash water in somebody's face while they're trying to swim up. They know not to push on people or jump on people. They know not to run on the deck, but to abide by the safety rules. So the more the coach can teach the student about being responsible for their own safety, the safer the coach can keep the class. Okay? Now, on the next tier up, if your manager or your director would ask you, whose responsibility is it to make sure that you, the coach, are doing everything that you're supposed to do to maintain safety for your classes? Whose responsibility is that? The coach may answer, well, it's the manager's responsibility, or it's the company's responsibility to make sure that I'm being safe. Although there is some truth to that, the more that your manager and the corporation can impress upon the coach that it is the coach's responsibility to maintain safety in their class, that they need to be responsible and accountable for the actions and safety considerations of their class, the more safe they and their students are going to be. Okay? Now, if we convince the students they're responsible for their own safety, we convince the teachers that they're responsible for the safety of their class and for themselves, then the corporation itself has done its best job in maintaining its responsibility for the safety of all parties. Now, what student goes out and buys, I'm going to take swim lesson liability insurance? Probably zero, right? What swim coach goes out and buys, I'm going to be a swim teacher, personal liability insurance, so that if somebody gets hurt in my class and I get sued, I can pay for that. And I won't be having to pay for it by having my wages garnished or going bankrupt. Okay? Probably none. Okay, although it's not a horrible idea, but it's not absolutely necessary, because what are the chances you think the corporation that we work for, Trix, is and has liability insurance? Okay? The truth is, it's the law. You can't be a corporation without having liability insurance. You can't have a business license that's valid without having liability insurance. And so the ultimate financial liability can lie with the corporation, but only if the coach is following the instructions provided them by the corporation. Okay, so if you're following the lesson plan and somebody does get hurt and the person who's suing you, their lawyer comes in and they talk to you and they say, okay, coach, tell me, why did you have this student do this skill at this time? If your answer is because that's what's on the lesson plan, that's what I'm instructed to do, I was doing what was required and instructed of me and what I believed was reasonable, then if they find fault with that action, that fault lies with the corporation, because you were doing what you were told as an employee of the corporation. Okay? On the other hand, if you, the coach, your answer is, well, because those are advanced kids, so I went outside the lesson plan, I did an extra skill, and I got distracted, and so the student that was on the step, they got hurt. Okay? If that's your answer, then the corporation isn't responsible anymore. Although they might try to make them responsible, you personally become responsible for that action and possibly financially responsible for any lawsuits. So it's super, super important that you follow the guidelines of the corporation, because otherwise you're taking on the risk and the liability by trying to set your own standards or policies or procedures, and that will make you that will expose you to liability. So my best recommendation is, if you don't want to pay for the injury possibly pay for the injury of a child in your class, follow the lesson plans, follow the rules of the corporation, and stay under that protection of the liability insurance that the corporation has, and we call that a liability umbrella. Okay, and you stay under that umbrella by following the guidelines set. Okay, so this is talking about disciplining your students, and we talked about helping them follow your direction, etc. Okay, now disciplining the students, it's important to be consistent. I talked earlier in the lesson in this training about enforcing all rules all the time. Enforce all rules all the time. It's important to be consistent. Otherwise, it's confusing to the students about whether it's important to listen to you when you're feeling angry, when you're feeling upset, when you've run out of patience, when we're running out of time. They want to know that they should listen to you all the time, that all the rules apply all the time. That way they'll stop testing when they apply and when they don't apply, and they'll move on to trying to get the best positive attention they can in your class. So it's important to be consistent. All right, these are all about disciplining your students, okay? And a lot is about still your own discipline as well. Swim safety topic number 7, be proactive. Proactive means to take action before the event, okay? To be ahead of the action. 7A, manage your class, okay? In order to be safe, the best way to be safe is to prevent injury or accident. Well, the best way to prevent injury or accident in a class environment is to manage it. That means that you're actively directing your class. Two of the most important, if I was going to tell you the two most important factors, if you did nothing else and learned nothing else as an instructor, then these 2 points would be pivotal to your success as a teacher. Number one, keep them busy. Busy kids are too busy to be getting in trouble. So you keep the turn pace going well, you keep all the kids involved, you make sure everybody gets a turn, make sure that your time is evenly distributed, and you don't let one child over monopolize your time for class. So number one, keep them busy. Number two, use positive reinforcement. Okay? Positive reinforcement. What is positive reinforcement? If I were to define positive reinforcement in a simple way that applies to teaching, it would be praise that is specific. If you take any kind of praise like good job or hooray, and then you make that specific. Good job on those fast kickers. Now you told the student they had fast kickers, and that was something you were looking for. That's what makes it positive, because that was what you want to see is fast kickers. Now they know exactly what to repeat in order to get that praise again. Good job, fast kickers. You could even say, wow, those were fast kickers. Wow makes them know that that's something nice that you want to repeat. And fast kickers, again, is more specific. Hooray, you made it all the way across the pool. Now the child knows that putting that effort in to build endurance is something they want to try again in order to get that positive experience of your praise, okay? So really, specifically, positive reinforcement in a simple way can be praise made specific. There are other forms of positive reinforcement that may not necessarily be praise, but it's difficult to make it seem positive without at least a tone of praise, okay? If you said something like, hey, you went all the way across the pool, that's still stating the same topic, but that does not seem like a positive reinforcement, because the tone of it doesn't sound like something you're encouraging them to do. That's why, in my opinion, praise is an incorporated part of positive reinforcement. But praise alone is typically non-specific, okay? If you make praise specific, though, you have positive reinforcement. 7B. Be clear and consistent when giving instructions, okay? So clear and consistent. For instance, if in regard to safety, it's important that all the students wait on step number 1 for their turn. That's the safety zone for them to wait. So when you're telling a student to sit on step 1, that should be an instruction. It should be instructive. Sit down on step 1. If you want to sound more polite, you can say, please sit down on step 1. Okay? But you should not make it sound optional by saying stuff like, hey, can you sit down on step 1? Because the student can answer that question with no. Hey, can you sit down on step 1? No, I can't. I don't know how. I don't want to. When you phrase an instruction as a question, you are implying to the student they have an option. Okay? So when you say, hey, how about sitting down on step 1? And they're like, nah. Okay, and then you're like, oh, well, you have to get out of the pool because you're not listening. That doesn't sound fair. That's like saying, okay, would you like a chocolate chip cookie? And they say, no, thanks. And you go, well, then you need to see your mother and talk about listening. Okay, those two things don't go together, do they? Because it's not logical, all right? So it's not fair to your students. It's not helping them understand that what you said to them was an instruction if you phrase it as a question. So it's very important to phrase all of your commands as commands. And safety, really, there can't be an option to not abide by the safety rules. You can't say to the kids, hey, do you guys think you can walk over to the drinking fountain? Or do you want to walk over to the drinking fountain? Or it would be nice if you walked over to the drinking fountain. All of those things make their reaction optional. Okay? And their reaction truly isn't optional if you assume they want to continue participating. So you shouldn't confuse them by that. You need to say things like walk when you're on the deck. That makes the instruction a command, and that makes it more likely your students will understand what it is you're trying to ask them to do. Okay? That way you can elevate the safety level of them because they know what you're talking about. Along this same lines, a lot of 3-year-olds, they don't understand, they don't have a vocabulary as big as an adult. And so they may not actually even understand all of the words that you're saying. They figure out the meanings of those words by the tone and gestures of the person who's saying them. So if your tone doesn't sound instructional, then they will take it as optional. If your gestures look playful, then they're going to take it as playtime. Okay, and a lot of times play is opposite acting. So if you're saying, hey, how about sitting down on the step? Then they're going to be like, hoo-hoo, is this a challenge to not sit on the step? Okay, so it's really important that you're guiding them in a way that they understand and will abide by that. Okay? Be clear and consistent when giving instructions. Some other ways you can do that are to use multimedia communication to reach all learning styles. When I say multimedia, I don't mean get out the PowerPoint and show a movie, okay? Multimedia means to reach all learning styles. Students take in learning in different formats, okay? Lots of students are visual, so they can see your demonstration and understand the skill. A lot of children are auditory, so they can hear your instruction and understand the skill. Some students, though, are not auditory or visual learners. They're kinesthetic. They need to move through the skill to understand the skill. So if you use the medium of moving them through the skill to communicate how to do the skill, then they'll understand the skill. It's the same way with disciplinary rules, with safety rules. If you're telling a student they need to stay on step 1 to stay safe, they may not understand that really literally until they're off step 1 and they accidentally submerge. Of course, you're going to be right there as a teacher and you lift them up and say, that's why you need to stay on step 1 for your safety. Okay? Obviously, we don't want children to suffer all the natural consequences of neglecting safety rules, because the natural consequence of not being safe is getting hurt. Since we don't want them to suffer the natural consequences, we're going to help give them an artificial consequence. So we're going to tell them, these kinesthetic learners, they may not understand what you mean by you have to stay on step 1 to stay in the pool until they're on the edge of the pool. Now don't confuse sitting kids on the edge of the pool with a timeout. We are not a punitive swim school. We don't time out. We don't put kids in the corner. We don't skip turns for disciplinary reasons, okay? We might have to go on to the next student turn if a student goes out to the bathroom, but that's for practical reasons. We never skip turns, sit out of the pool, timeouts, any punitive, okay? They're sitting out of the pool because you care about them and their safety, so you sit them up on the edge so they're further away from the deep water. Some children really will only understand you need to stay on step 1 or I'll put you out on the edge in order to keep you safe. They only understand that once they're actually sitting out on the edge. That would be a kinesthetic learner. Okay? There are other learning styles, but the more different ways you say stuff, the more patient you are, the more immediate you follow rules like reinforcing sitting on the step 1 rule, the more likely you're going to reach all those learning styles. Okay? Don't wait till you're frustrated before you sit a child up on the edge of the pool, because then they're going to think they're in trouble and that you're angry. Okay? You don't need to be angry, and the student doesn't need to be in trouble in order to be safe. Right? You need to follow all the rules all the time. Be clear and consistent by using specific language. Okay? Most of the time that I see a student or a class that's not behaving is because the teacher is not giving instruction. It's important to tell the students, your turn is starting because I called your name. Thank you. Hey, you did your turn. That was great, kickers. Now your turn is over. Please sit down on step 1 and wait until I call your name for your next turn. That phrase tells the students that they need to wait for their next turn. And the more that you're instructing them using that specific language, the more likely they're going to be following your direction. If you're just saying, hey, good job, then that's too vague. It's not instructional enough. Okay? Use swim terms. Okay? We use different ideas like monkey, tree, rocket, chicken, airplane, soldier for elementary backstroke. But the students should understand the term elementary backstroke. They should know what that means in those movements and that they go together for that. Those are all important parts of being clear and consistent when giving instruction. Okay, swim safety, and we're talking about being proactive. Another way to be proactive is to watch and prepare for the unexpected. Okay, if you're watching for and preparing for the unexpected, it makes it seem expected. But on the other hand, you're just watching for it, and your preparation is not necessarily because you're expecting it to happen, but because there's a possibility it could happen. There's a possibility of equipment failure. We know we're not expecting our equipment to fail, but we're prepared for that. Okay, that's why it's unexpected, but we can prepare for that by checking our equipment. Okay, watching for equipment failure. We can watch and prepare for injuries by giving safety warnings, telling people to walk, warning the especially older patrons or people that have younger babies. About the heat in the pool room, because the heat could make it quite uncomfortable for a regular person and a person with some health issues or a very young child. It might be a bit overwhelming. We don't know how their day is or their condition, so it's important to give safety warnings. It's important to warn students that are swimming laps or if they swim without goggles on to watch out for the side, not to conk their head on the side. Okay. You're not expecting them to conk their head on the side, but you're watching for and preparing for that by giving that safety warning. Another way to watch for and prepare for the unexpected is to teach proper technique. Teach proper swim technique. This is going to help your students learn the skills in the way that's appropriate, be ready for the level that they get graduated in. Because they have the proper techniques, they are going to be safer swimmers. That's very important, and so you're helping them be better swimmers so they are safer swimmers. Also, watch for and prepare for the unexpected by being better safe than sorry. Okay, a lot of us have intuition. A lot of us know what's going to happen before it's going to happen, not because of some super psychic powers, but because our mind subconsciously is able to put together stuff that we may not be able to explain, but that is quite likely to happen. For instance, if you see someone standing up in there or making this body language, that means they may be off balance. They may be starting to fall. If you take action at that point, you can catch them before they fall rather than patch them after they fall. Okay? If you see you're getting ready to demonstrate a skill and you're going from the step out into the pool and you see your other students mimicking your same body language, they're getting ready to take off too. You might be swimming out across the pool and look back and see 3 of your other students because they took off at the same time as you. Okay? If you're watching for that, then you could prevent that unexpected event of turning around and seeing your students in the pool when it's not their turn by reacting to that. You see them starting to take off and oh no, this is my turn and it's not your turn and I'm going right now. Or better yet, turn around and do your demonstration toward the step, because then it's not as they're not as likely to mirror your behaviors if they're not right next to you doing the same thing. So anticipate that and be better safe than sorry. If you see a student who looks like they're swimming and then their swimming starts to go from horizontal to vertical, you can assume that they are a distressed swimmer and that they're going to need your assistance. So you're prepared to lift them and assist them out of the water and taking that action, rather than waiting for that point where their eyes bug out and they start choking on water. Okay, we don't want to wait to that point. We don't want to wait till we're consoling a student who took on water unexpectedly, because their progress goes backwards. And taking on water unexpectedly can be a dangerous thing. Even if the student hasn't technically drowned, there may still be water in their lungs that could cause them to get bronchitis or pneumonia because of the irritation to their lungs. Some kids are more sensitive to chlorine. There can be bacteria in the water. Even if the water is kept at the required sanitation levels 24/7, there can still be bacteria in the surface level of the water. If they inhale that into their lungs, they could get a lung infection from that. So you want to prevent that by watching out for them and preparing for that event. I hope that you've taken away from this presentation the most important parts of what you need to know about swim safety and about safely instructing swim classes with our facility. If you have any additional questions or concerns about the safety in your class, please direct your questions to a trainer or to your swim manager or director.